Chinese maker Leapmotor bounds into the UK market with this extraordinarily well-priced D-segment upper mid-size crossover, the C10, tested in this case as a full EV. The money being asked here would normally get you something smaller and feebler of range, and there's plenty of technology and lots of equipment as standard too. You can see why European conglomerate Stellantis decided to part-own the Leapmotor brand.
When it comes to EV powertrain development, an area where the Chinese brands have certainly stolen a march over Western ones is when it comes to what's called cell-to-chassis technology. With this, rather than a big battery being plonked on top of a chassis, the battery pack becomes integrated to the chassis of the car, which is a win-win scenario because this improves rigidity, enhances interior space, and dials up the drive dynamics. Like its Oriental rival BYD, Leapmotor claims to have pioneered this development. Whoever actually did, the Western brands are desperate for this tech. You'll see it on future Teslas, and it was probably the main reason that Stellantis paid so much for its stake in the Leapmotor business. All of which explains why this C10 shares absolutely none of its engineering with anything the Stellantis group has ever marketed before. Certainly not this car's 69.9 kilowatt-hour battery, the only one on offer, which Leapmotor makes almost entirely itself and seems very proud of, despite the fact that its potential 263-mile drive range figure is quite unremarkable by class standards. Or at least that's what it offers in this EV model. As we filmed, Leapmotor was preparing to launch an alternative C10 variant you might like rather more, a range extender or REEV version that matches a battery to a 218 brake horsepower e-motor and can more than double its electric counterpart's range to over 590 miles. It's the pure EV variant though that's our focus here. Just a single version is on offer with a rear-mounted permanent magnet synchronous motor developing 215 bhp. Acceleration is intentionally linear, so the car actually doesn't feel anything like as fast as the figures suggest it is. 62 miles an hour takes 7.5 seconds en route to the usual very modest EV maximum, in this case 106 miles an hour. The range extender model is a second slower, but shares this EV's 320 Nm torque figure, which allows for decent mid-range punch. Or at least there is in the more urgent of the provided drive modes, Sport. But with this EV variant's relatively restricted range figure in mind, you won't want to be using that setting too frequently. And in the other two main modes, Comfort and of course particularly in Eco, the C10 feels far less eager. Within the modes menu, you can also select Custom, which allows you to set up powertrain, steering, and brake regen settings as a one-touch option. Talking of brake regen, there are 4 levels of that provided: low, standard, high, or one pedal. The latter, rather annoyingly, requiring you to park up first before it will activate. Hopefully that'll be fixed at the midterm update. What you don't have to activate is the useful freewheeling function that automatically disengages the drive motor on flat or downhill sections of road where it isn't needed. We're reasonably certain that in the hands of an experienced manufacturer, the rigid platform and low centre of gravity enabled by the cell-to-chassis technology in play here could create a really excellent handling EV of this size. But Leapmotor isn't an experienced manufacturer, and to be frank, that shows in this C10's drive dynamics, despite the fact that Stellantis apparently loaned the brand some Maserati engineers to help tune this car for Europe. Contrary to the promises of the cell-to-chassis tech, there's plenty of body roll through the corners, mainly due to a very comfort-orientated suspension setup, which would be fine if such suppleness led the C10 to be as floaty over urban bumps as it is at speed through fast corners. But it doesn't, and you'll feel potholes and speed bumps more than you ought to. The price here suggests quite a compact SUV, but in the metal, the C10 is revealed as a much bigger D-segment one, Refreshingly, no attempts being made to deliver any sort of swept-back silhouette of the kind currently fashionable in this segment. But with its heavily glazed, smoothed-off surfaces, this Leapmotor still manages to be very aerodynamically efficient. Once inside, if you think it's all very Tesla-like, then Leapmotor will be pleased because that was clearly the designer's intention, which means a very minimalist vibe with a concealed full-width electric air vent and the kind of general absence of physical switchgear that any Western customer clinic would have told the Chinese makers' designers that European buyers are getting increasingly fed up with. There's even more of a homage to Tesla around the steering wheel. The gear selector stalk that American brand has now abandoned for its products has found a home here, and the roller buttons on the spokes are also near identical to those you'd find on a Musk motor. This 14-inch central touchscreen will feel familiar to Model 3 and Model Y owners too, though it's slightly smaller than the one Tesla provides. But just as full of menus and submenus that you'll have to quickly get to grips with because they control all sorts of essential functions. Not only the climate system, the drive modes and the brake regen functions, but also stuff like side mirror adjustment and seat heating and cooling. The brand hasn't followed the current trend for joining the infotainment and drive dial monitors together, so the instrument info you view through the strangely shaped steering wheel is covered off by a separate 10.25-inch screen. What else? Well, there's a light and airy feel thanks to the enormous 2.1 square metres standard panoramic glass roof, and fit and finish seems quite good. The quality of the Okotex certified silicone-trimmed faux leather upholstery doesn't. Presumably Chinese buyers have forgotten what real hide feels like. You may or may not be convinced by all of this. If not, let's take you to a part of this car that might very well sell it to you: the rear seat. This is where that extra body length advantage over similarly priced contenders in this class really pays off. There's a vast amount more space for legs and knees than almost any car we can think of under £45,000, with plenty of room to slide your feet below the seat in front and an airy feel emphasised by the big panoramic roof we mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, when the time comes to investigate the luggage bay accessed by the standard powered tailgate, it turns out that there's a price to pay for all this rear seat space. You may well find this EV model's cargo area's 435 litre capacity to be enough, even though it's about 150 litres less than you'd get, say, in a rival Skoda Enyaq. But it's hard not to be disappointed by the fact that this is less than you'll find from the much smaller 4.3 metre long SUVs we mentioned earlier. With the RE EV range extender model, boot space falls to 400 litres. There are no cargo sidewall catches for flattening the rear backrest either, but at least it does go completely flat, freeing up 1,410 litres. It's 1,375 in the RE EV range extender version. Only this EV variant gets a further 34 litres of storage space beneath the bonnet, useful for the charging leads. We gave you the EV mileage figure in our driving section, 263 miles, providing you keep the car in its most frugal eco-drive mode. Driving range, though, isn't the area where you'll really find the major catch that you might have been waiting to discover within this car's buying proposition. For some potential owners, that's more likely to lie in the available DC public charging speed. It's a feeble 84 kilowatts, which really isn't good enough. All of this means that DC public charging with this Leapmotor takes longer than the norm, though not that much longer. A 10 to 80% DC public charge of this C10 needs around 40 minutes. That's nearly twice as long as a Model Y. A 30 to 80% DC charge would be 30 minutes. Still, if all you do most of the time is charge this car from home, that might not matter much. AC charging from a 7.4 kilowatt wall box takes around 10 hours for full replenishment, though you can reduce that to 6.1 hours if you only need to charge from 30 to 80%. If you have a 3-phase supply and can charge at 11 kilowatts, as the C10 does allow you to, the full replenishment time would be 6 hours and 21 minutes. In summary, the C10 is the kind of car the European makers feared the Chinese might try to flood our market with. Does it change things that the car is, in this case, part European owned? Well, Stellantis obviously think so. It'll be interesting to see if customers agree.